I am Mary, the mother of Jesus, and this is my story. There is a thing that happens to a mother's body when her child is in pain. It is not a thought. It is not a feeling exactly. It is older than both of those things. It lives below the mind, below the heart, somewhere in the marrow of the bones themselves. The moment I heard what they had done to him through the night, the trial, the mocking, the scourging, my body knew before my mind had finished forming the words. My knees went soft, my hands went cold, and something deep in my chest, something that had lived there since the first moment I held him in a stable in Bethlehem and counted his fingers in the dark, pulled tight like a cord being drawn to the point just before it snaps. I had been awake since before midnight. I think we all had. The city does not sleep during Passover, and this Passover carried a weight that pressed down on everything. The stone streets, the olive trees, the shoulders of every person who had followed him and now stood at the edge of what was coming, not yet ready to look at it directly. When they told me they were taking him to Golgotha, I did not weep. I want you to understand that. The weeping had already happened. What was left inside me by that morning was something harder and quieter, a terrible resolve. I would go. I would stand there. Whatever it cost me, I would not let him look down from that place and see only strangers. A mother does not leave. That is the one thing I could still give him. The road through the city was a cruelty of its own. The stones were uneven and old, worn smooth in the center from years of feet and cartwheels, rough and treacherous at the edges. I kept my eyes on the ground and then forced them up again, because I needed to see him, needed to track him through the crowd the way you track a lamp flame in a windstorm, desperate, fixed, terrified of losing the light. He had been carrying the crossbeam and it was too heavy. Of course it was too heavy. They had destroyed his body through the night, and now they expected it to carry wood through the city under a climbing sun. I watched him fall, and the sound of his body meeting that stone, traveled through the crowd and into me like something physical, like a hand reaching inside my ribs and closing into a fist. I tried to move toward him. The crowd held me back the way a current holds you. You push, and it just surrounds you, and there is no breaking through. I could not reach him. I could only watch, and that is a kind of suffering that does not have a proper name. He got up. Of course he got up. Even then, even with everything stripped away, he got up. And I pressed the back of my hand against my mouth and breathed through my nose and followed him the only way I could, through the gaps, along the edges, watching his back through the bodies of strangers. My mind kept doing something strange on that road. It kept pulling me backward. I would see his torn shoulders, and suddenly I was in Nazareth, washing those same shoulders when he was 4 years old and had fallen climbing the fig tree behind the house. The water in the basin had gone pink with the small wound, and he had sat very still, patient even then, watching my face rather than the cut, checking to see if I was afraid so he would know how afraid to be. I would see the crown they had forced onto his head, and suddenly I was in the temple in Jerusalem when he was 12, watching the teachers look at him with a confusion that was almost reverence. And I had been so angry with him for staying behind, so frightened from 3 days of searching. And he had looked at me with those eyes and said, "Did you not know I must be about my Father's business?" And I had not fully understood. Even then I had tucked that moment away and tried to understand it later. The way you fold a letter you're not ready to open. I had been folding things away for 30 years. Now they were all unfolding at once, and I had nowhere to put them. Golgotha smelled like the end of the world. That's not poetry. That is memory. The place carried the smell of old iron and sun-baked limestone and something beneath it, something I did not want to name. The ground was pale and hard, the kind of ground that gives nothing. No shade, no softness, no mercy. Small rocks pressed through my sandals with every step. The sun by then was climbing toward the center of the sky, and it fell on everything without pity, the way indifferent things always do. I found a place where I could stand and see him. John was with me, faithful John, and he put his hand on my arm, and I was grateful for the weight of it, because I felt as though I might simply come apart without something holding me to the earth. They raised the cross. I will not describe what my body did in that moment. There are things that live inside a person that belong only to that person, sealed and private, and that is one of them. I will only say that the sound I heard coming from somewhere nearby was an animal sound, wordless and broken, and it took me a long moment to understand that it was coming from me. He was up there, and I was down here, and there was nothing, no amount of love, no force of will, no word or prayer or plea that could cross that distance. Here's the thing about watching your child suffer that no one tells you. There is a part of your mind, a small, shameful, exhausted part, that begins to search for an exit, not from the place. You would never leave the place, but from the feeling. The mind goes looking for a door in the wall, some way to step slightly sideways from the unbearable weight of what you are seeing, because human beings are not built to hold that much and stay standing. I found myself thinking about ordinary things, the water jar at home, whether I had extinguished the lamp before I left, the way the bread had smelled that last evening they were all together in the upper room. Small thoughts, foolish thoughts. And then I would look up at him again, and the weight would come crashing back, and I would be drowning in it again, and the small thoughts would be gone. This is the hinge moment I need to tell you about, the exact second. He looked down. It was not a sweep of the crowd. It was not a general gaze. He looked through the bodies and the noise and the heat and the smoke, and he found my face, my specific face, his mother's face, and his eyes. I have been searching for 30 years for the right words for his eyes, and I have never found them. His eyes were not desperate. They were not wild with pain, though the pain was real. They were the same eyes that had looked up at me from a feeding trough in Bethlehem, the same eyes that had watched me from the water basin when he was 4, the same eyes that had found me in the temple crowd when he was 12, present, unafraid, unbearably full of something I can only call love, though that word is too small and too worn down by ordinary use to hold what I saw in them. He spoke. He looked at me and then at John, and he gave us to each other, even there, even then. He was still taking care of the ones he loved. He was still in the middle of his own ending, thinking about mine. The cord in my chest, the one that had been pulled tight since midnight, did not snap in that moment. It held, because he was holding it. He was holding me, from up there, with nothing but his eyes and his words and whatever it was that had always been in him. That thing I had carried for 9 months without understanding. That thing the angel had tried to explain and I had treasured in my heart without ever fully opening. I stopped trying to understand it. I just let it hold me. The darkness came in the middle of the afternoon. There is no natural explanation I can give you. I only know that the sun was there, and then it was not, the way a candle goes out, and the crowd went very quiet in the way crowds go quiet when they feel something they cannot name. The cold came with the dark. I pulled my cloak tight and stood in the sudden strange night and kept my eyes on him. He cried out once, a cry that went into me like a blade and came out the other side, and I remembered. I remembered with my whole body, the old man Simeon in the temple all those years ago, when Jesus was 40 days old and I was still learning the weight of him in my arms. Simeon had looked at me with kind and sorrowful eyes and said that a sword would pierce my own soul. I had wondered across 30 years what he meant. I stopped wondering. When it was finished, when he gave up his spirit and the ground shook and the sky cracked and the soldiers stumbled and grabbed their spears, I did not fall. I want you to know that. I have thought about it many times since, why I did not fall. I think it is because he had not fallen, not in any way that mattered, not in any way that would last. He had chosen this. From before the world was made, I believe now, he had chosen this. And I had been chosen to be the one who brought him into it, who held him in Bethlehem, who walked this road, who stood at the foot of this hill and refused to look away. There is an ache that still lives in me. I do not think it ever fully leaves. A mother does not stop being a mother when her child is gone. The love has nowhere to go, and so it stays. It fills the rooms. It comes up suddenly and without warning on ordinary afternoons. But underneath the ache, there is something that does not ache, something solid and quiet and unmovable, the way a foundation is unmovable even when the house above it shakes. He told me not to be afraid once, through an angel, before any of this began, before the manger, before the temple, before the road, before Golgotha. I finally understand what he meant. Whatever you are carrying today, the grief that has no floor, the love that has nowhere to land, the fear that the thing you cannot bear is already on its way. I want you to know that a mother stood at the foot of the worst moment in human history and did not fall. Not because she was strong enough, because she was held. The scripture references are Luke 1:26-38, Luke 2:25-35, John 19:25-27, Isaiah 53:1-12.